Now let's discuss the coupler and bucket configuration. So as we discussed, one of the things about this machine is we've recognized that it has a mechanical coupler. Whether it has a mechanical coupler or a hydraulic coupler, we want to make sure with a mechanical or a hydraulic, we're really looking for the width of the coupler. Some couplers get a little wider where they make their attachment. And as soon as that happens, what changes is the pin to tip ratio. And what's very important on a mini or a midi class machine, even a big full-size machine, we want to keep that ratio within the specifications of the machine. Each machine has X amount of gallons per minute flow and things it needs to use to make them productive. The other most important part of that machine is getting the right class bucket. This particular midi excavator, this is a 17 or 18,000 pound machine, has what I would consider an 18-inch bucket on it. This machine will handle this class of bucket very easily. This machine actually will go up to probably about a 36-inch to a 48-inch ditch bucket with a smooth lip. This particular bucket is used for digging, has digging teeth on it. It's very important that you pay attention to the teeth on your machines, that the wear of those don't get clear back into what's called the leading edge of the bucket, and or make sure that the teeth stay good and sharp so they can dig and pull themselves through the ground. So one of the important things if we're going to take this machine on trade we want to pay attention to is when we take a look at this mechanical coupler, we want to see the function of the coupler, make sure it works, okay? Again, we're just pulling a pin. We would jump up in the cab, unhook the bucket. A hydraulic one, we want to make sure we set in the seat, push the proper buttons, make sure it hydraulically works. There's a lot of liability if a hydraulic coupler doesn't work and it doesn't attach or hook or unhook properly. So we need to make sure we check that. With a mechanical, it's pretty simple. It's self-explanatory. A pin gets pulled, it goes back in. The other thing we want to look at is if a customer is going to trade this to us, we want to see what condition the bucket is in. This is in good condition. Looks like the teeth are new. It is a properly sized bucket for this class of machine. The machine will work very well with this class of bucket. So we want to make sure. The other thing we look at while we're down here is any weldments that looks like that are non-manufactured weldments. We want to make sure that there's no welds that have been done to this machine to put it back together again, because you get cracks and damage through the life of the machine. Now let's talk about the dipper and boom configuration and the importance it is to the machine and how it produces. On this midi class excavator, one of the very important things again that happens, we've covered now how important it is for the mechanical coupler and bucket to be married up to the right class size for this midi or mini or full size. But you want to make sure that, again, you have the right marriage of coupler with bucket. The next move that happens, we start moving up what is called the dipper. This is called the dipper on the excavator. We start moving up the dipper, we want to start paying attention to a few things. Again, as we've called out before, we see this thing has auxiliary hydraulics. I'm not sure if it's one-way or two-way hydraulics, so it's either single or nibbler breaker hydraulics on this unit. But one of the things we start looking at, we want to see any of the weldments on any different function, anything that could be damaged, because that's what we're looking for. Whether, again, I'm buying this unit, I'm taking on trade, I want to see how much wear and tear this has taken. Any scars and markings like this, not really worried about, okay? I'm worried about cracks and welds. So it's very important once we get on an excavator, we're going to have to get up in the cab, we're going to need to extend the boom and dipper and bucket cylinder so we can start checking out some of the top cylinders and items we need to look at on our appraisals. When reviewing any excavator, one of the important things we have to pay attention to, this happens with a new excavator or a used excavator or even on the trade. It's going to be very important that we make sure we know the length of the dipper and even length of the boom. And there's also things we can do once we extend the machine out. We can take a look and start checking some things out as well. Again, looking back at pins and pin wear, as well as any weldments that could be bad, or areas that are maybe conducive to cracking. No matter the brand, you'll see pins and bushings get cracked. There might be cracks in welds. We want to take sure and make sure we're checking all these weldments from the manufacturer. We're looking for anything that doesn't look like manufacturer welded. But to go back, what's very important for us, whether it's in sales or if we're going to buy this machine for use, We want to know if we can get the proper dig depths, as well as understanding that the longer our dipper is, the less output we get on the machine, okay? The farther we put that bucket away from the capacities of the machine, the less work we're going to get done. And sometimes we have to sacrifice that for the depths we want to get to. So on a midi excavator, as I spoke earlier, when you add a coupler and maybe a thumb and an improper bucket to what would be called the long dipper or a long stick, it's going to take away from your production. So again, this is a 7-foot stick. I've measured it's actually 7 foot in a little bit. We're going to need to know that when we take this thing on trade. We're going to have to give that information maybe to the future buyer or for what we're looking for on the trade-in. The other thing we can do is measure a boom. Now typically the boom, this piece is the boom. The boom is not as important, and I watch how I say that, in what the length is, okay? It obviously affects our front reach and our dig depth. It is important to know it, but it's not as important to the production of the machine as the dipper because of the weight that you add to the dipper. Again, things we're going to look at on this boom. As I spoke before, we're actually looking for any of these weldments. If they look like they're non-manufactured welds, we're going to look for the pins. Just like we did on the dipper, we're going to look for wear on the cylinder. We're going to look for any damage to the can on this, what is called the boom hoist cylinder. That's the boom hoist cylinder, okay? This is called the dipper cylinder. Obviously, the one back up in the front is called the bucket cylinder. Again, at this level, we can start checking the condition of the can and the cylinder itself. It's very important that we do that. We can also view any of the lines, see if the lines have been replaced or they look new. We can look for dry rotting on the lines. We can look for, again, any cracks coming off of fittings. It's very important to pay attention to that stuff. They can become very costly if it's overlooked. So one of the big discerning things about a mini or midi excavator is actually what's called the swing boom. You don't tend to find that on full-size or heavy class excavators. The swing boom allows this machine to set in this stance. You can actually swing the house, which is what the cab sets on, over to one side and then swing your boom around and dig next to or beside the machine. So the swing boom is very pertinent. However, the swing boom causes a particular set of problems. So it's very important when we're looking at a trade-in or, again, trying to buy it or sell it. We have to make sure this has a lot of wear items. When you come down to the foot of the boom, you have a pin and bushing that goes through. Again, we have to make sure it's greased. There's grease zerks here. The other thing that happens is all the hydraulic lines run up into and through this area, coming down off of the boom and stick. You have a pin and bushing here, which is actually what makes it swing. Again, there are grease zerks in this area. It needs to be done. A nice way to check the integrity of this area is jump up in the cab, start the machine, and put down pressure on the bucket. When we put down pressure on the bucket, what we can look for is wear in this pin and bushing, whether it moves up and down or side to side when we actually function it. We're also going to look in this pin area to see if there's wear as we put down pressure. If there is, it means this area may not have received enough grease. And if it doesn't receive that grease, again, as we've talked a lot today, you'll find that if it doesn't have grease, you have metal to metal wear. That's going to accelerate the wear and cause a lot of damage down the road in value and production of the machine.